Okay, so let me show you how the porn industry works. This is one of the fathers of what we call gonzo porn, hardcore porn. I'm not going to read that. Nobody's going to translate that, but if you read it at the bottom, you'll see what he says. Now, when I first came across Max Hardcore about 15 years ago, and I saw his films, I knew I was watching a sexual sadist. It was beyond anything. His images belonged on an Amnesty International site. Indeed, if he would have been torturing any group other than women, there would have been an outcry. But if you torture a woman and you call it sex, then all of a sudden it becomes fun and fantasy. So Max Hardcore helped found what is called gonzo porn. That's what the industry calls it, gonzo. This is your hardcore, in-your-face, cruel, violent porn. When I started to interview the pornographers 15 years ago, nobody would talk about Max Hardcore. They always said, he gives us a bad name, we refuse to discuss Max Hardcore. And then, when I went to the porn convention a few years ago in Las Vegas, the biggest porn convention in the United States, where 10,000 fans and me ended up one January, he had the biggest stall in the room with the most fans. He was front and center. That tells the story of porn. It has moved from the softcore Playboy and Penthouse to mainstream hardcore porn. So in porn, you don't have women, but you have sluts and whores and bitches. This is the kind of thing they call women. Why? Because the average man and boy masturbating to porn is not a sexual sadist. If he thought he was masturbating to cruelty and violence, his erection would go stone dead. So what you tell him is that the women in porn are not like any other women you've met. They're not like your mother. They're not like your sister. They're not like your girlfriend. They're a generation of women who stand apart from other women. Nothing like other women. It's not true. They are your sisters. They are your daughters. They are the women you love. But these women are poor and they're poverty-stricken. And anyone here who is a mother will tell you, you will do anything if you're starving to feed your children. Absolutely anything, including going into pornography and prostitution. And remember, pornography is prostitution with the camera going. It's the same industry. It's the sex industry. So, I'm going to now show you some of the scenes. One of the things that they accuse feminists of is that we always pick the worst. Well, I'm going to tell you that I don't pick the worst. I don't go near the worst. I follow the breadcrumbs of a 12-year-old boy without a credit card. So what I do is I put porn into Google and I just follow where he goes. No credit card. So I'm now going to introduce you into mainstream pornography. So you're 12 years old, you're male, you've got hormones raging, you've got an erection all the time and you don't know why, and you put porn into Google. What do you come up with? The thing you will come up with in virtually every single scene, no matter what you look, is gagging. This is where they put the penis so far down her throat that she's choking. And they put a lot of mascara on them. So the mascara is running down her face and she is choking. And when you watch it, if you've got empathy, you start to feel like you're choking as well. Now, what happens in here, and this is the 12-year-old boy watching this, as she's choking, the male, the porn performer, he doesn't take his penis out of her mouth. He grabs her head and drags it towards his penis even more. So she's choking even more. So she's got saliva, her nose is running, her eyes are running, and he's saying in a very clear voice, "Look me in the eye, look me in the eye," as she's choking. Now that's a sexual psychopath, you understand? Now whether he is a real sexual psychopath or not, I don't know. I'd have to do a study. What I do know is he behaves like a sexual psychopath. So our 12-year-old boys are learning their sexual cues from men who are behaving as if they're psychopaths. Because the essence of a psychopath is you have no empathy. And you're watching her choke, and yet you're continuing to choke her. So think about who are now the major sex educators of our kids. It is basically a group of men in Los Angeles, in a very small area, who have colonized the world sexually. This is American colonization, economic colonization, cultural colonization, and now sexual colonization. A small group of men in America determining the sexuality of boys all over the world. Because this is not their sexuality, this is the pornographers. So then, as I was writing my book, Pornland, and I'm watching all this pornography, I'm thinking, what would my son have felt like when he was 12 years old and put porn into Google and come up with this? Because what do you think the 12-year-old boy thinks he's going to get? Maybe breasts, maybe a naked woman. Do you think for 1 minute the 12-year-old boy thinks he's going to get gagging? Of course he doesn't. So the question becomes, why does he stay on the site? Why doesn't he go running and screaming to a parent saying, look what I've seen? Well, then I started to read what was on the sites, and it's very clever. So let me read this for you. This is on a site called Gag Me and Fuck Me, popular site. And this is very, very clever. So if you read it in Polish, I want to bring your attention to the bit that says, we take gorgeous young bitches and do what every man would really like to do. Now think how clever this is. He's 12 years old. He's developing his sense of himself as masculine in this culture. They're telling him, you want to join this club we call men? This is your entry fee. Porn is the way you become a man. It is your rite of passage into masculinity. And what is your 12-year-old boy going to do? Say, I don't want this, I'm not man enough for this? So he's being dragged into a hyper-masculinity based on cruelty and torture of women, not one he chose. One he is being reeled in like you reel a fish in. Now, let's think about this 12-year-old boy, because my boy was 12 at one point. Let's think about his arousal, and he's masturbating. So he thinks this is what he wants, but he's also ashamed. He's also fearful. He also feels terrible about himself. So he has a toxic stew in his stomach of arousal, fear, shame, self-loathing. You are traumatizing that 12-year-old boy because this is not what he thought he was going to get. And he is basically cementing that trauma with his erect penis and his ejaculation. Now, think how brilliant this is as a business plan. Because when you are traumatized, if you do not deal with that trauma, what do? You go back to the place at which you were traumatized again and again and again in the hope that you will have a different ending. But it's never a different ending. It just digs the trauma deeper into the brain, which Don will talk about later. So what are you building in the 12-year-old boy? You're building pathways to addiction. This is brilliant, right? The more you traumatize him, the more he's likely to become a habitual user of porn. And believe me, a 12-year-old boy looking at those images is going to be traumatized. Another very popular act is anal sex. Now in porn, anal sex is meant to deliver to the woman the message of just what a filthy, dirty slut she really is. It is pounding anal sex. I mean pounding. So much that one of the big problems for women who work in porn is that their anuses drop out of their body. They're constantly having to have their anuses sewn back in. Anal prolapses. Now again, I want you to read the promotional copy that goes with the film, Anally Ripped Whores. All right, you're 12 years old. What are you going to do with this? Where are you going to go with this? When you're being told that this is what's fun. This is what makes you a man. So the standard porn movie is one woman and 3 men. She's being orally, anally, and vaginally pounded away. They're spitting in her face, they're pulling her hair, they're calling her a bitch and a whore, and the final scene, the money shot, is all 3 ejaculate on her face. And when you watch this, at the end, she is exhausted. She's lying there, and you can see she doesn't know what to do with herself. She's got ejaculate dripping all over her. Her body is swollen all over, her anus, her vagina, her mouth, everything. Because I'm not watching it with arousal. If you watch porn without an erection, you see the violence for what it is. It's the erection that stops men from seeing the violence that porn is. And porn is a form of sexual cruelty that is socializing an entire generation of boys into losing empathy with women, into losing the capacity for intimacy. We know from studies that the earlier you use porn and the more you use porn, the less capacity you have when you grow up to develop connected, intimate relationships with women. And I have to tell you that, again, as a mother, and as a feminist, and as a scholar, but mainly as a mother, I know that my son was not born a porn user. He was not born a rapist. He was not born a batterer. He was not born a pimp or a John. But this culture has trained him to be all of those things.